I'm Dr. Rick Watch, and I'm here with a couple guests you're going to love. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Rick.
Gary Christopher from Ezra. Welcome to the interview. I'm Dr. Rick Waj, and we have a very special guest on the show this week. That is Dr. Wave Nunnally with Bible Unplugged. He's the Professor Emeritus of Early Judaism and Christian Origins at Evangel University. Wave, how are you doing, my friend?
Hello, Dr. Rick. It's good to be with you today. We're doing great.
It's good to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time. You were here in the center of the thing that God is doing on the planet, and that is in Amarillo, Texas. You were here a while back. And,
right in the middle of COVID.
That's right. It was in the middle of COVID. I forget.
Yes,
Has it been that long?
Yep, it sure has.
Okay, so fill me in. What's going on in your life?
Well, my wife and I have both now retired from active full-time professor positions at the university, and we have gone full-fledged into weekly podcasts or new episodes every week on Bible Unplugged. That'd be Wave Nunnally, YouTube, Wave Nunnally, Facebook. And where I'm getting to do the kind of stuff that I've been wanting to do for the last 30 years, but because of full-time classroom teaching and other deadlines and responsibilities, committee work, et cetera, we just kept pushing these things back. And now we're having the opportunity to do things like a series on the genius of Jesus, his incredible creative ability, and walking behind the rabbi or walking after the rabbi, and all of the festivals of ancient Judaism, most of which are still celebrated today, and how they connect with New Testament realities. It largely revolves around Jesus and his original historical context. And it's just so exciting because we're getting to pick and choose the things that need to be done that either haven't been done or haven't been done well. And we're enjoying every moment of it. We're also conducting Bible study trips to study the Bible in context in the land of Israel. And that's amazing. And I'm also having the opportunity, as of about 4 years ago, to train Israeli guides on how to provide Bible in context to evangelical groups and groups that are looking to get serious boots on the ground Bible study in context in the land of Israel.
So you're not doing anything?
No, not a whole lot. In addition to that, we're coming out with a new version of the commentary on the Book of Acts, which is about 700 pages, and doing publishing of other kinds of other articles related to historical Jesus studies. Example, how Jesus prayed, and looking at how Jesus moved in his prayer life within his context of first century land of Israel Judaism. And it was an absolutely fascinating study, and I loved writing the article.
Wave, you are by far my favorite teacher on Israel TV network. No doubt about it. There is, wouldn't you say that most of us look at the words of Jesus in a very naive way, very elementary compared to the genius of Yeshua, of Jesus?
Well, yeah, first of all, thanks for that compliment. I hope it doesn't get you in trouble with hosts of other TV shows on ITVN.
It probably will, but that's okay.
Yeah, you'll live through it, right?
I'll live through it.
But I appreciate that. And I'm up against some pretty stiff competition. But yes, I would. I've been hammering away at this Jesus in his original historical context now for over 40 years. And I would say that even I am a novice, because I'm constantly discovering things that are at least new to me as I study the words of Jesus in the Gospels. And it's a fascinating process of discovery, because you just never know what is going to turn up next. And every time I make a discovery, I have this kind of foreboding feeling, almost like, instead of enjoying the moment like you should do, my first thought is, oh my goodness, what else am I missing? What else is yet left to discover? And as we get to middle age, and then we start moving into older age, and you realize that your wick is burning short, you're thinking, my goodness, if I only had 2 lifetimes or 3 lifetimes. But it's just not set up like that. Everybody's got a shelf life, everybody's got an expiration date. And so in some measure now, I'm trying to really put things in fast forward and plow through more stuff, I mean, create more stuff, and stay in the Gospels, and trying to listen to the words of Jesus with a kind of freshness that an original hearer or participant in a story would have heard those same words.
It's a lifelong process.
Yes, it really is.
I am not, I don't consider myself on your level in any way, shape, or form. As I go through and I study through the Aramaic text and rabbinical writings and compare and contrast that to the words of Yeshua, of Jesus, I'm blown away by how much we don't know. Do you recall years ago, many years ago, Dr. Kenneth Wiest wrote the expanded translation of the New Testament, the Greek translation? If you remember that, I was blown away by how much was not translated when you look at the Greek text. And when you expand it out to the meanings, the deeper meanings of the Koine Greek in the New Testament text in Greek, there's just so much more. Well, I'm seeing the same thing in Aramaic, of course, and I'm just wondering, how much people miss when they're only looking at an English translation of a very, very, very Jewish set of books in the New Testament.
Right. Yeah, we're often missing, especially idiomatic expressions that Jesus uses, and the only way to really be able to dig back into that is to familiarize yourself with the literature of the Second Temple period. And when you do, you are taking a step closer to the way that Jesus communicated to his audience, that was perfectly familiar with those idioms and the way that the language developed.
Yes.
Between Old and New Testaments, and they got it. And too often we're English access only. We're missing it. On the other hand, Dr.
Yes.
Rick, without trying to get away from that attitude toward the Bible that the Gnostics took, which is only we have the hidden insight to be
yes.
able to decode, the secret messages of the Bible and stuff. There's a whole lot that we can do. If you're limited to an English access only,
Sure.
you can still see bleeding through our English translations some of the most incredibly beautiful and creative things that Jesus is doing, even working with an English only access.
Yes.
For example, and everywhere I go, churches that I go to, seminars that I teach, or conferences where I speak, I'm trying to challenge people, do this at home, try this at home, as compared to the TV commercials. Don't try this at home. Do this at home. For example, start looking at the structure of what Jesus does. It's very Hebraic, looks just like the psalmist or Isaiah, or the like in his Bible. And that is things like chiastic structure, or Hebrew poetic parallelism. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. You find this going on all over the place in Jesus' Bible, and he's doing it as well. But what's amazing is he's creating his own parallels, Hebrew poetic parallelisms, And he's not just quoting the Bible. He's so proficient in this that he's almost doing it without having to think about it. It's all over the Sermon on the Mount. It's throughout the Gospels. And you will oftentimes not only see the beauty of what he's doing, the incredible creativity that he is expressing, but it also sometimes helps in terms of understanding his words better. That certainly happens when you're reading the Hebrew Bible, because if you don't get the first line, the first kick at the cat, the second, third, fourth, or even sometimes fifth in the Bible, you go, oh, okay, I get what the author is digging at. And so the very format or structure, literary device that the author is using plays to our good, because if we don't understand one attempt to communicate one thing, usually in Hebraic poetic parallelism, Old Testament or Jesus teaching, you'll get it in the second or third or fourth or even fifth try at it. And that's great for the Bible interpreter. You get kind of 5 tries for the price of one.
One of the things that's been very exciting for me is, for example, Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5-7, that area of scripture where the master is teaching, and it seems at first glance that he's just going from one topic to another topic to another topic, and they're completely disjointed from one another. But that's not the case. The more I have looked at this, the more I see the brilliance of why he's going, or why it's recorded that he's speaking from one and seemingly a different topic, which are not. One blends completely to the next.
Yes.
Very, very logical thinking. Brilliant. The other thing I wanted to say is some of the things that I've seen now are the way when Jesus teaches these, he's using sometimes rhyming words, comparing one word to another word.
Yes.
You don't typically get that in the English translation, and somebody's really bright when they've translated, they'll put it in commentary notes.
Right.
Or even syllables, using some of the same syllables that kind of, so it's a mnemonic kind of thing where people would remember because of the way he's either rhymed it or the syllables, or it's just brilliant.
Yeah, example of that would be, don't cast your pearls before swine, Hebrew chazirim, lest they turn and trample you, chozrim. It's a play on the word for swine and for turning, or turning around, or returning. Only people that really know what they're doing and have this incredible facility in language are able to do that. Back to your stream of consciousness thing, one of the most obvious examples that I think we usually miss in English is when Jesus gives a little section talking about money or possessions, and then he gives a section on, he says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If the eye is sound, the whole body is full of light, but if the eye is not sound, then the whole body is full of darkness, and how great the darkness. And then in the next section, he goes back to money again. And so you go, why is he switching topics? Can't he just kind of stick to, if he's going to talk about money, stick to money? The point is, all 3 of those are about money, and the eye is the sound eye, or the benevolent eye, where you're supposed to be using the blessings that God gives you to help other people, as opposed to being the evil eye, or the unsound eye is the miserly eye that withholds help that you have the ability to give to someone, but choose not to do it because of your own selfish inclination. So it all has to do with making proper use of the blessings that God has given on you. He's not switching topics at all. It's just, we tend to think, when you hear about eye and evil eye, we think, oh, now he's talking about lust. He's not talking about, some kind of, sort of like sexual perversion or whatever. But that's overlaying an English idea of, or use of language, over onto a person who's not even thinking in terms of the English language. It didn't exist in Jesus' day, and trying to understand his thought flow in light of the way that we use words as opposed to the way he uses words.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And It's just this great adventure when you begin to dig and dig and dig. Let's change topics. The influence of the Exodus event, the influence of the Egyptian culture on the Hebrew language, or vice versa, when we're looking at the Tanakh, but maybe more specifically the Torah. So, and one example I'll throw out there and just run from there would be the term for evil, which in Hebrew is
Ra.
Ra.
Yeah.
Okay, Ra. But Ra is also given as one of the gods in the Egyptian culture. So you can see this coming against the deities within Egypt and using that as a form of speech to depict that which is the most evil. But I mean, I think the list is probably endless when you start studying through the Torah and comparing the gods and the culture of Egypt and the experience of the Exodus. Okay, it's all you now.
So yeah, Jesus is constantly using language that sometimes it's ancient, but he's also putting a contemporary twist on that. And I think that other rabbis are doing it. I think maybe he does it better than anybody else. He's just such an amazing communicator. But think about it. What he's trying to do is, and Josephus says this, and other early writers say this, that he leaves behind a body of teaching that his disciples are perpetuating. And so when there are no tape recorders and there are no post-it notes and people aren't walking around with Jesus scribbling on notepads, or notebooks, how do you get a body of literature literally memorized by his first followers in such a way that they can then transmit that stuff accurately and authoritatively once he's gone? And so he will use, like other rabbis in his day, he will use some of the same sort of devices that aid the memory. Poetic parallelism is one. Wordplay is another. Repetition is another. Some of the stuff, when you read Jesus' words, actually could very easily be translated. I don't really like the music genre, but could actually be rapped very easily because it has cadence, beat, same beats per line, and that kind of thing. And so, not surprisingly, in the early rabbis, you'll hear Rabbi Akiva say, "Chant your oral instruction. Chant it every day." And then you'll hear rabbis say things like, "The person who, or he, they'll say." Repeating your learning 101 times is better than repeating it 100 times. So there's this constant repetition. Here's another thing that is an interesting reality. When you compare Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you'll oftentimes have Jesus putting a different spin on the same parable, or the parable will show up at a different point in time in Jesus' ministry, maybe early in Matthew, and it shows up later in Luke. Well, liberal commentators, or middle of the road commentators, for a couple of hundred years at least, have said, well, this indicates that they're toying with the Jesus tradition,
Right.
and that there are inaccuracies within the Gospels, because Matthew records it early and Luke records it later. Matthew says there's this ton of money in the parable, as opposed to Luke, who has just this small amount of money in the parable. The point is that Jesus is repeating his teachings at different places with different audiences in mind, and at different points in time during his ministry. Other rabbis, you'll find the same parable in early rabbinic literature repeated over and over and over, and it's not always verbally exact. It's
And
the
we
same
do
words.
exactly the same thing today. When a
Yes,
when a preacher will speak to a different congregation,
that's
he
right.
may spin things just a little bit different to make it
Exactly.
connect with that audience.
Yep. Yeah, when you find something that actually works and that resonates with people, then you tend to reuse that. But the point is that we have accurate gospels today, because of this amazing use of memory in the first century. We have incredibly accurate gospels because of Jesus' incredible ability to communicate in ways that were memorable, and he then intentionally repeats material that he finds important, because repetition is, as we know from school and learning spelling and verb tenses and all kinds of stuff, there's no substitute for repetition. Unfortunately, our culture has been hijacked by what is expedient and what feels good to us. And so repetition translates into American culture as boring. In Jesus' day, repetition translates into necessary for accurate transmission of oral material.
Amen.
Thankfully, we end up with accurate gospels because of all this.
Yes. Okay. So most people, most lay people, don't have the type of libraries that either you have or I have at their disposal. What could you, as we have like 5 minutes left, if you can believe it, what would you recommend they pick up as a couple of basic tools to be able to get at some of these really deep and wonderful nuances within the words of Yeshua, Jesus?
Yeah. Well, as you know, Dr. Rick, my focus has been the literature and history of early Judaism as the background for the life and ministry of Jesus. And thankfully, in our lifetimes, in fact, in the last decade, there are a number of online sources or resources that help the average person to be able to access literature that was usually restricted to theological libraries and stuff like that. For example, if you go to earlyjewishwritings.com, that's easy to remember. Earlyjewishwritings.com is like, wow, that sure makes sense. So a wonderfully named website. You get for free and right there in your own home on your computer screen, all of the between the testaments apocryphal material, Tobit and Judith and First and Second Maccabees and Ben Sira and stuff like that. You get a lot of other stuff. For example, the writings of Josephus, first century Jewish historian. They're beginning to load onto that other material like Philo of Alexandria, a contemporary of Jesus.
Yes.
Then you can also go to there's another kind of corollary website, earlychristianwritings.com, where you can get the materials of some of the early authors after the apostles, like Clement of Alexandria, Clement of Rome, etc., Saint Irenaeus, Tertullian of Carthage, etc. And so there's that kind of stuff. Another wonderful development is that there's all of early rabbinic literature online now, and you can get it as an app for your phone, or you can download it onto your computer. It's called Sepharia.org, Sefaria.org. And let me just tell you one really quick story, and I'll be as quick as I can. I was on a flight between point A and point B recently, and I found myself reading this really kind of off the beaten path midrash called Avot the Rabbi Natan. And we're just sitting there on the airplane reading it off of my telephone screen, and made an incredible discovery that helped me to better understand an aspect of ritual purity that was going on in the days of Jesus. You know, Jesus, Joseph, and Mary practiced it. We find Paul practicing ritual purity in the book of Acts. And it underlies all kinds of, why are your disciples eating with unwashed hands, and those kinds of things going on in gospel narratives. And I found a missing piece to something I had been looking for about a decade. And there the text just literally jumped out at me from off of my phone screen, and Sepharia.org and this off the beaten path midrash called Avot the Rabbi Natan. Absolutely wonderful. We're living in that kind of day where we don't have to always go to Israel and be digging in caves like for Dead Sea Scrolls. There's tons of stuff right around us, largely in digital form, and so much is left yet to be done in this area of Jesus in his original historical context, that it would take you and I 4 or 5 more lifetimes and still just barely scratch the surface. I just say to people, get out there and earlyjewishwritings.com, safaria.org, and start having your own wonderful experiences of discovery.
Those are great references. I'm going to make sure that we put those in the lower thirds where people can later, after watching the show, get into those. Those are all great. Safaria.org I've been using for the longest time. Fantastic. There are so many, you're right. There are so many great resources available now that it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg. I don't know how much money you have into your library, but I have enough for a lifetime of savings that have been spent on books, and they continue to come out. There's great writings now to really look at the authentic Jesus, his lifestyle, what was going on at the time, why he would approach subjects in a certain way. Dr. Wave Nunnally, I so appreciate you taking the time out. You have a busy schedule. I think you're just about to go to Israel again.
Yes.
Thank you. How can people connect with you and go to Israel with you?
So you can go to wavenunnally.com, WAVENUNNALLY.com. And there our trips are study trips that we're going to be taking in the future. They're already listed there. And if you're interested in studying the Bible in context, we're certainly willing to help facilitate that. And I'd also encourage you guys to look at the Wave Nunnally Facebook, Wave Nunnally YouTube. There are over 200 free videos, teaching videos, Jesus in his original Jewish land of Israel historical context. And we're putting new materials on every week.
And you can find a lot of what Dr. Wave Nunnally has done on Israel TV Network. We're going to continue to push his materials because it is just the best. You want to go deeper? Watch Dr. Wave's shows. And Wave, thanks again for being on. And for everybody, thank you for supporting Israel TV Network and watching Bible Unplugged, Dr. Wave Nunnally. We'll see you next time. Shalom, shalom. The interview. I'm Dr. Rick Watch. I'm here with a couple guests you're going to love. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Rick.
Gary Christopher from Ezra.